So, are you a landlord in California? If you own a single-family home or a condo as a rental, you actually may be exempt from California's rent control law, AB 1482. But like all things, there is a catch. Unless you give your tenants a signed exemption notice, you actually might lose that added protection. So if you do own a rental or even considering owning a rental property in California, this video is probably worth a watch. So I'm Harold Powell, local Ventura Realtor, and if you are looking for real estate content, then I suggest hitting the subscribe and bell icon to be notified of future content. So what is AB 1482? Well, AB 1482, also known as the Tenant Protection Act of 2019, is a state law in California that places caps on rent increases and sets rules for evictions. But certain properties, like most single-family homes and condos that are not owned by large corporations, are exempt. I will say that certain cities, such as Oxnard, have additional tenant protection and rent control ordinance that will take precedent over the state law. So that being said, it's a good idea to actually check with the appropriate legal professional for guidance before taking action. So let's first take a look at what properties qualify to be exempt from AB 1482. So a property is exempt if it falls into one of these categories and the tenant has been given the proper written exemption notice. So number one is single-family homes and condos are exempt if it's owned by an individual, a family trust, or an LLC without corporate members. The required exemption notice is given to the tenant in writing in order for it to be exempt. Otherwise, it is not exempt if the property is owned by a corporation, a REIT, or an LLC with corporate membership. So next is owner-occupied duplexes. All will be exempt if the owner lives in one of the units as their principal residence at the beginning of the tenancy. Exemption notice is also given, and of course it's not going to be exempt if both units are rented out or the owner moved out after the tenancy began. Number three is new construction is exempt if the property received a certificate of occupancy within the past 15 years. So it just means that if that property is 15 years or newer, likely it will be exempt. So this leaves the types of properties that are not exempt, such as apartment buildings, duplexes where the owner does not live in one of the units, and again, single-family homes or condos owned by a corporation or REIT or LLC with corporate membership. So the question is really, what are the benefits of being exempt? So number one is evictions. One of the biggest advantage is when it comes to selling a property. So if you are exempt and have the form signed, then you can evict the tenant if you are selling the property in California and is considered a just cause. Otherwise, if you're not exempt, then it is not considered a just cause to evict at that point. So this can make it very difficult for a seller of a rental property, since they would be limited to just investor buyers being able to purchase the property, since you can't evict the tenant legally unless you are exempt. Now, in these cases where the property again is not exempt, you may consider having to offer additional financial incentives, such as cash for keys, in order to get the tenant to agree to move out. Additionally, non-exempt properties have to pay a relocation fee, which is equivalent to 1 month's rent for no-fault eviction. A no-fault eviction is where the tenant has not violated the terms of the lease. An example of a no-fault eviction would be a family member that is going to move into the property. But again, for a property that's going up for sale, that would not be considered a reason to be able to evict the tenant in that case. Number two, market rent. The second benefit of being exempt is you retain the right to adjust rent based on market conditions. Instead of being limited by the cap, which is 5% plus inflation up to 10%. Now, some cities such as Oxnard have set a yearly cap of 4%. So the challenge for many landlords is they often are not raising rents yearly and soon fall far below market rents and now are stuck raising it by the yearly cap. On the other hand, if you qualify for the exemption, you are not limited by the yearly cap. Both of these benefits will require checking with city ordinances to determine if the exemption is applicable or if some other rule is applicable. Bottom line is, if you are a landlord in California and your property qualifies for the exemption, then it is in your best interest to get the exemption notice signed. It obviously gives you more flexibility for being able to sell your property and fewer rent restrictions. And when you do need to decide to take action, since certain cities have adopted their own ordinances in addition to AB 1482, seeking professional legal advice is the key to determine if exemption applies to a particular situation or not. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Thanks.